out of time.
That's it?
Yeah.
Why does it go by so fast?
If I could tell you the amount of time women have said that to me.
What if we let you know that one of Hollywood's brightest stars went and had a completely mind-blowing moment on live TV that the cameras didn't capture? On an evening when Mila Kunis joined Craig Ferguson on his show, she did something that left everyone speechless. But what actually went down that night? Keep watching, because you won't believe the real story behind this unforgettable interview. Trust me, there is more to the story than what the cameras are letting you in on. What you didn't know about Mila Kunis's wild interview. It started out as most episodes of The Late Late Show do. Craig Ferguson, quirky, a little offbeat in his humor, greeted Kunis with that knowing grin that screamed, "This is going to be good." Mila, ready to have a good time, charmed her way into the guest chair. But what appeared to the audience as some kind of playful give and take took an unexpected turn. Mila was about to toss the script out the window, literal and otherwise. Their conversation began light enough. Craig, ever quick with a joke, asked Mila about her latest project, and she responded with her usual humor and charisma. Then, out of nowhere, Mila said one thing that had Craig doing a double take, the kind you can't miss even if you blink. It was one of those, "Wait, did she really just say that?" moments that had studio occupants inching in a little closer. Of course, the studio audience laughed because that is what you are supposed to do in a late-night studio. But there was something else in Mila's eyes, a glint, really suggesting she was about to break some sort of unspoken rule of the late-night playbook. And Craig? Well, he knew it too. His smile faltered for just a second before he regained his composure. But that fleeting expression said more than any joke ever could. It was as if a switch had flipped. Mila started taking over the conversation, steering it off the safe, rehearsed talking points. She joked about Hollywood, but her words had that sharp edge, the kind that betrayed a truth nestled deep in the belly of laughter. Craig tried to keep up cracking a joke here and there, but all of a sudden, Mila had taken over and wasn't about to give that steering wheel to anybody. Then she did the unthinkable. She turned the spotlight right back onto Craig. Mila playfully grilled the host, turning his own jokes against him with a mischievous grin. The crowd ate it up, but Craig was visibly caught off guard. For a moment it felt like Mila was hosting the show. She pushed the envelope and said things that you'd never expect on a late-night segment, and somehow made it work. Yet, with humor aside, there was silence in the air, like anyone was just waiting to see how far she'd go. But here is the kicker. This wasn't just Mila being spontaneous. There was more to it, something deeper hidden behind her playful exterior. Why was she pushing limits that night? Why had she decided to let loose in a way she never had before? Maybe that was a smidgen of stage fright, or perhaps that was due to something behind the scenes that we will never be able to know. Or maybe this was just Mila deciding for once to allow the world to see the real version of herself. Whatever the reason, one thing was certain. This wasn't going to be like any interview Craig had prepared for. Behind all the laughs, though, something brewed nobody noticed. It was that very thing that would make even the staunchest fans scratch their head, wondering what actually went down once the cameras stopped rolling. The real reason why Mila's words left Craig speechless. When Mila Kunis joined Craig Ferguson on The Late Late Show, fans anticipated the usual banter, playful jokes, charming smiles, a few inside jokes between the two. What they got was far from ordinary. Right from the beginning, Mila set a different tone, veering off the script with unsuspecting energy. What she said next completely caught Craig and the audience off guard. Mila was sharper than ever, full of quick wit and unexpected revelations that make the host do double takes. Craig, always prepared with quick-wit responses at hand, suddenly found himself in a game where he wasn't totally in control. Mila threw out unfiltered remarks about moments from past interviews to opinions on Hollywood, even teasing Craig in a way that would have suggested there is something deeper between them. Craig's face spoke volumes. He was amused, and yet shocked with the turn of events so unexpected. As Mila continued, the normally PR-ready veneer that celebrities wear on such shows slowly peeled away. There was a rawness in her words, a willingness to stray from the prepackaged anecdotes that make late-night TV so predictable. It was refreshing, but it also hinted that something a bit more personal was simmering below. Was Mila revealing what was on her mind? Or was this all part of some sort of honed act? Both the studio and at-home audience leaned in, recognizing immediately that this wasn't going to be some ordinary interview. Mila's frankness developed a certain rare tension, a feeling that something explosive could happen at any moment. Craig tried to pull the conversation back onto familiar ground, but Mila consistently pulled it back into uncharted waters. She said that in passing, what sounded innocent enough on the surface, with a hidden meaning there. Craig just caught on to it, or so it seemed. His reaction? One raised eyebrow, followed by his chuckling and seeming to show a bit of unease. What did Mila mean by that? It was one of those moments where everybody felt they were in on some sort of secret, just nobody knew what the secret really was. Craig, the consummate host, cloaked his surprise with a joke, but the tension was palpable. What did Mila insinuate, and why did she utter those words on national TV? But as bold as her comments were, Mila had something even more jaw-dropping up her sleeve, something that would turn the whole thing upside down. What the media didn't show you about Mila's next move. About the time they thought they had seen it all, Mila Kunis decided to take the show in a different direction altogether, leaving Craig and everybody else scrambling. It was one of those moves that cameras could only half capture, but if you were there in the studio, you knew you were onto something special. Mila, in one of those rare moments that really didn't feel scripted at all, the talk show perfect, huddled into an unscripted moment that felt profoundly real. The studio vibe flipped, and in that moment it became an event that tipped between reality and something far more curious. But backstage, the team was reported to exchange nervous glances, Mila's spontaneity engaging yet risky. For a show reveling in manufactured bedlam, it was all a bit too wild. Afterwards, crew members spoke of split-second decisions about what to broadcast and what to axe. Craig, the quick-witted host, gamely tried to keep pace, but there was a sense even he wasn't quite sure where the conversation would go next. And then, the bombshell dropped. Mila, inching closer towards Craig with that wink of hers, did something no one quite saw coming. It wasn't the next wisecrack that came. As if suddenly plunging right into the heart of some forbidden forest, she reached out and laid her hand across Craig's desk in a gesture both playful and defiant. The audience actually gasped. Is this part of it, or is it real? Craig stood between them, his face breaking out into a wide, nervous grin. He was used to pushing the envelope, but tonight, Mila sure seemed to be calling the shots. The cameras cut to commercials seamlessly, but it was those seconds that really got the studio talking. A rumor mill got churning, stating that when the cameras stopped rolling, Mila and Craig shared a candid conversation backstage, a moment not meant for the public eye. Did they address the tension that's been piling up in the interview? Or did Mila drop yet another bombshell that left even Craig speechless? The exchange didn't even spare the fans after the episode had gone on air. The internet was just afire with speculations. What exactly happened during those off-camera moments? The broadcast had shown a light, playful interview, but according to people in the know, something more complex is said to have created the hologram seen later. But if you thought that was where this story ended, you'd be wrong. But behind the scenes, there was still another twist that no one could have foreseen. One which would change forever the way we think about this unforgettable moment. The backstage drama no one knew about. The on-screen chatter was electric as Mila Kunis joined Craig Ferguson on The Late Late Show. Backstage, however, the energy was a whole different thing. The whispers of random remarks, raised eyebrows, and the like. Mila may have playfully bantered with Craig, but if sources close to production are anything to go by, not all wasn't as well as it seemed. Rumor has it that from the very moment she came on, the crew cut side glances, as if to wonder what might have set it off for Mila to be so candid. Why was everybody so uptight? Craig Ferguson's interviews were, to some extent, known for being a bit unpredictable. yet he himself seemed somewhat taken aback by how brazen Mila was. During the taping, her responses strayed far from the usual Hollywood talking points. She went off script in a way that even left the experienced host dumbfounded for a second. While her comments were light-hearted, they carried with them a tone that made many speculate on what might set her as candid. Meanwhile, backstage opinions would be abuzz about how she might have stepped into taboo as far as late-night TV is concerned. In fact, the really interesting things were happening off-camera. But just when you thought you heard it all, there was always one more turn. Indeed, those who were backstage do remember Mila's conversation with Craig taking a completely different turn once the cameras stopped rolling. Insiders say she shared some thoughts on a darker side of Hollywood, hinting at struggles and experiences she'd never made public. Was this an unplanned moment of candor on Mila's part, or is she hinting at something more on purpose? One thing is for sure. None of those who were present that night appears to recall what had happened, yet it indeed left an indelible mark. As for Craig, though affable, even casual-seeming, when he was on the air with the host, rumor has it that in private he turned more ruminative about just how sideways the conversation had gone. Some people present from the show did mention that he was apprehensive, knowing full well Mila's frankness. After all, late-night interviews are always that thin line between entertainment and too much information. But did this really happen, or was there a more substantive reason for Craig's reaction? They were still arguing about it on social media years later, posting clips of when Craig seemed a little tenser. Some said he'd been thrown by Mila's comments. Others insisted that was all part of the act. But for sure, one thing could be said, that this interview had longer-lasting effects than its actual running time, with those involved still guessing as to what really went down. And just when you think the story is about to culminate, some sort of revelation might just turn everything upside down. Why Mila finally spilled the truth about that night. It wasn't until years later, after that infamous interview, that Mila Kunis finally explained what was running through her mind during that candid chat with Craig Ferguson. She looked back to that night in a recent interview and explained the openness was no accident, but one of those moments where she felt this rare freedom to say what was on her mind. Or could there have been more to her confession than a case of spontaneous honesty? During the interview, Mila gave an inkling that she was tired of the Hollywood facade. She explained that at that time, she was tired of the media scrutiny and pressure of having to look picture-perfect always. This suddenly turned the whole, now seemingly playful interview into a very serious one, showing that her jabs and witty remarks were more than just jokes. They were an attack against an industry that often sometimes commands one's uniformity. It's a plot twist even her most loyal fans didn't see coming. But what was it that finally made Mila decide to open up? People familiar with the matter speculate that the recent stir in interest about the interview compelled her to tell her side of the story. Snippets of that episode have been making the rounds on social media, with fans deciphering every word and every smirk. According to sources, Mila was surprised by how much attention that particular interview continued to get. But speaking about it most recently, she seemed to suggest that she didn't regret lowering her guard, even if it did raise a modicum of controversy. But as Mila discussed struggles and pressures she experienced throughout those years, she mentioned an incident very few knew of. She spoke about the time she walked away from a big project, actually, pretty much ran away from some creative differences that eventually led her to rethink how she'd approach interviews, for instance, with Craig. Did this let your guard down Mila give evidence of deeper life and career changes? Or did it presage the more outspoken position she's held in recent years? Just when it seems we may actually have the whole story, Mila drops a bombshell. There was a private conversation between her and Craig after the cameras stopped rolling that she never planned to make public. What was discussed in those final moments? She has kept that part close to her chest, teasing that it's something of a memory she prefers to keep between herself and the former late-night host. The cryptic comment has set fans abuzz, speculating on what was really said when the spotlight dimmed. Mila's decision to finally address this chapter from her past gave us insight into her mindset. At the same time, it gave us more questions than answers. Why now? What does that say, more importantly, of the side of Mila Kunis which the world rarely sees? Saving the best for last, she gave us our final hint. There's still more that hasn't come out. Stories which would change how we see that night forever. But until then, that mystery is going to linger. How that night redefined Mila and Craig's dynamic. That night, Mila Kunis joined Craig Ferguson on his show would eventually prove to be more than just another late-night conversation. It was a game-changer. There was an undeniably different shift in the vibe between the two during that interview. The candid comments by Mila did shake things up, but what happened next was something nobody saw coming. Was that the moment their friendship changed forever, or was it just that one slip of honesty? Let's peel back the layers and see what that wild night did to the markings of both stars. Right from the very beginning, Craig and Mila showed an undeniable chemistry, a playful yet comfortable banter that many guests lacked. But the energy shifted as Mila dropped some unfiltered remarks. Craig's the type of guy who always rolls with whatever curveballs his guests throw his way. But this time, he really seemed thrown. And that wasn't even the best part. Cameras captured a few reactions from him, but what happened off-camera was even more telling. According to several reports, things were icy backstage, with producers said to be unsure how to handle any fallout from Mila's frank comments. Craig handled it like the professional that he is, but sources close to the matter say he wasn't entirely happy with how the night panned out. The two reportedly had a brief but heated discussion backstage. Was it a moment of conflict, or a quick attempt to smooth things over? Speculation has continued, but one thing's for certain. Their interactions in subsequent interviews seem to have a different tone. Gone was some of the spontaneous warmth, replaced by a more careful, measured exchange. It's as if that night left an unspoken boundary between them. But maybe that's what happens when a conversation takes such an unexpected turn. Could it have been the night that forever shifted their rapport? And this isn't some speculated notion of fan interpretation. Fans have pointed out that in later interviews, there was a certain distance between Mila and Craig that wasn't there before. Was Craig more cautious with Mila after her unexpected openness that night? Or was Mila simply showing a side of herself which couldn't be recontained? To this day, that moment upon the stage is amongst the hottest talking points amongst their fans. A defining moment in their dynamic, really, that no one can forget. Mila's unfiltered comments that night also had repercussions on a broader level, especially regarding her public image. She's known for being open and down to earth, but this took things to a whole new level. It wasn't just Craig who was speechless. Social media was abuzz with reactions, some congratulating her on being honest, while others tagged her as being too much. This wasn't the first time Mila has found herself in a controversy, but it definitely added a layer to her reputation. Whatever the case, did this frankness help or hurt her? To be debated, but surely made her more interesting to her fans. But the real kicker here, one that will keep you guessing, is whether this was all a part of Mila's grand design. Isn't she trying to say something, to shake things up, knowing how it is sure to go down in the world? Or was it indeed an unplanned slip that so happened to make headlines? With both stars still dodging questions about that night, the mystery endures. And perhaps that is exactly the point. So did Mila Kunis truly lose her mind? Or was there something deeper behind her wild behavior? One thing's certain. That interview left a mark on late-night TV that won't be forgotten anytime soon. Was it spontaneous, or a cleverly orchestrated move by Mila? You be the judge. Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more untold stories from Hollywood's biggest moments.